Hello, welcome to another episode of Reddit Critique. I'm Jamie. I will be your artist, person, critiquer for the day, and hopefully my cat will also behave while I record all of this. No guarantees. These are some of my favorite videos to make and record because as artists, we need a community in order to grow. And by providing critiques, we reinforce various ideas that we have learned as an artist, and by having our work critiqued, we see things that we may not see before or find areas for improvement. So this is our friend. The logo on all of their pieces, I'm going to make myself look really silly, is edible crayon. I'm sure everyone in the comments will tell me how they pronounce the word. So this person says, these are, I think, my best art. Whenever I look at a finished product of my art, I always feel like something is missing. No matter how many details or less details I put, it just feels empty. Maybe I'm too dumb to notice. I really just need y'all to open my eyes for me. Please be honest in a constructive criticism way. I don't think you're dumb. I think this is something that happens as an artist, that we look at our art for so long that sometimes it's hard to see what is missing in our art or what we could do to improve it. Yeah, so I always try to provide constructive criticism. Now, because you have some stylistic choices in your pieces, some of it is going to be opinions that if you want a certain effect to go around this way. But here are the pieces. This one, I'm not going to give a lot of comment on because it is pretty outside of my wheelhouse to add this much bright color, although I do really like it. I think it looks neat. Okay, so we have Yellow Mask Guy. I don't know if these are original characters or if they come from a fandom. There's one that I do recognize. And then we have this cool lady with a little sheep guy hanging out over here. We have this nefarious fellow. I do like the green glowing glasses. I think this piece has a really cool effect. This guy, I do know. Okay, when I say I do know this guy, I'm pretty sure this is like Nightwing from Batman. We have this moody fellow. We have Riddle Rose Hearts. That looks cool. We have a different logo down here. I do like the glowing eye. And we have this guy, who I'm pretty sure is from an anime, and I don't want to look silly and guess which one. So that is our lineup. I'm not going to talk about all of them because we would be here for like a while, but an overall thing that I have noticed, one of the things that probably makes them look a little less finished, is going to be where you do add details and where you don't add details. And I think, so for example, the nose, we know that this is going to be catching the light, but we don't know the details to add on the face. We don't have enough information on the nose. We don't have enough information in the eyelids or the eye area. And so I think rather than filling in enough information and keeping an anime or animated sort of style, we are filling in those details with texture. Alright, so here is Moody Boy. I'm going to call him. Pulled up beside us, I have an Asaro head. This little guy is useful. We will make a new layer. When we are working in a more cartoon style, whether that is Western animation or anime, we still want to have an appropriate amount of information. So if we're going to go for a painterly effect, we still need to pay attention to the planes of the face. It's just the size of our eye has changed. So here we have a light source, and we notice that this part of the cheek is going to gain the highlight. We have this part of the eye that gets the highlight, and this corner, because our light source is coming from down below and slightly to the side, which is unusual. Usually this gets one of the darkest shadows on the face. We also have this lower lid is going to be catching the light, and the bottom of the nose and the upper lip are all catching the light. So with our little Asaro head, we will put him to the side. We'll come over to this guy. So again, this is catching the light. Also his lower eyelid is catching the light. The bottom of his nose is going to catch that. Poor guy cannot smell the roses because he does not have a nostril. That would be a good detail to add. We also have the upper lip is catching a bit of the light. And so I think what happens is we want to draw in a cartoon style. We want to draw from imagination, and there's nothing wrong with that. In order to draw from imagination, we need to have a strong visual library, meaning we need to know all of the parts of the eye, all of the parts of the nose. And that's a lot of information to know, and that's a lot of information to learn in all different lighting situations. So rather than having to learn all that information, that's where we look for a reference, whether it's real life or a Asaro head like this. We're just looking at the planes. Also, this light is also going to be down here on his chin. On his neck. Right, we have this line right here. That actually meets underneath the ear. This little tendon guy. And then his Adam's apple will catch just a bit of that in-between tone. Depending on if he has more Asian features, he will also have that crease in his eyelid right in here. We have a face that reflects the light better, right? And I got this from having an Asaro head. Real life references also help with this. If we have this light source coming in like this, a little bit of this is going to be down here, reflected onto his shirt, depending on what color his shirt is. It's hard to tell because it's dark. There's a good chance that he just has a black shirt, but even then there's going to be just a little bit of a highlight right here. Because his skin is this very saturated orangey color, I'm going to guess he has a light source like a candle or a fire creating this sort of light. Therefore, I agree his eye should not be super bright. However, with eyes, they are shiny, they are wet, and they will have the bottom part of his eye down here is going to catch some of this light. It looks like you took the eye and painted it and then put a layer over it to make it darker like that, rather than painting it in the environment. I'm kind of guessing on that. With the eye, because it's a sphere, the top lid creates a shadow, and the bottom lid, because the eye is a sphere, this bottom part of the lash line is going to have the most amount of highlight because it's sticking out, and because the eye is wet and our tears kind of collect in that area, so that's going to create the shine. And then of course we have the iris, which is the colorful part of the eye. That's usually going to get the lightest, brightest color down here because again, it's a sphere and that's where it's catching the light. And then we of course have the pupil, and then our little highlight. As a general rule is going to be the little highlight is going to be opposite from the most colorful part of the eye. So we'll brighten his eye just a bit, and then this is a style choice. If you are going to have lines, actually we'll go both routes. If you're going to have a painterly style like this, I think you can add more information, so like the Asaro head, the different planes of the face, and remove the need for lines. If you are going to use lines, I prefer Clip Studio, so I will create a vector layer, which allows me to erase lines using a vector eraser, which means if I make a line and they intersect, I can cross my lines, and with a single swipe get rid of that intersection. This is super helpful because when I'm making line art, it means I can do longer strokes and I can remove that scratchy overlay. I can create smoother lines overall. It's very helpful in creating a nice smooth line art. I also do when I'm creating line art, because I do have a webcomic, I do my sketch layer, I make it blue, lower the opacity because Clip Studio has that feature, and then I make a new layer for the line art, because I notice in the original, when we zoom in really far, we still have this line to determine what direction the face is going, which tells me you didn't make a new layer for the line art. A few other notes. Along the lines of how to add details, we want those details to be giving us more information. So like on his hair, if our hair is turning this way, right? I'm gonna actually darken those just a hair. The top of his head, because our light again is coming from down below, this is all going to be super dark. And then this brighter color going to come in, that's a little too bright. It's going to come in about there. I'm going to see that towards the tip of his hair. We have maintained a cartoon style because his eyes are still large, his nose is still anime-esque, but we have added more detail, and those details tell us more about the form. Not necessarily adding texture. Adding texture doesn't always make a piece look more finished. I do love a good cyan rim light, so that's cool. I think you're doing a lot of cool things in this piece. So you have this really moody lighting. You have a lot of good colors mixed in. You have this really bright orangey color contrasted with this blue in the shadows. I forgot that I was going to mention, can add a bit more detail in the shape of his eyebrow to give him a more worried expression. Rather than defining this with lines, we can define these things with value changes and with plane changes, and that makes things look more detailed without necessarily going in for a brush that has a lot of texture or adding a lot of different elements. And also I would go with a new layer if you wanted to go with line art. There are a lot of different styles that I use line art in, and there are times that I don't use line art. So I think it's certainly a stylistic choice. The difference between, in my opinion, using line art as a stylistic choice and using line art as a crutch, if you know where the planes of the face are, and you know how to define all of this by using value changes, you do not need to have line art to show those changes. If you want line art, go for it. But if you feel like his eye disappears if you paint it, it means you don't know enough of the detail that make an eye look realistic, and you are depending on line to define the features. If I were using lines, I would probably make it really thin right here, just because there's a light source there, and I think it kind of detracts a little bit. I think you could go lineless. I really do. You just need more reference and continue to expand on your visual library. Speaking of visual libraries, I like this piece. I think it's super cute. I am sad the little sheep is sad. I assume he's going to be less sad because he has a nice priestess lady to take care of him. A note that if you have a light source like this, that tells me that there is a sunset, and the sun is somewhere over here. Actually, let's go with this color. The sun is somewhere over here, which means he is radiating that way. Now, the brightest part of the sky in a sunrise or a sunset is going to be where the sun is in the sky. So this color is fine. I'm going to go in with a soft brush and put in the sky. Currently, it looks like you had an idea. I like the idea. You created the person, and the background was kind of an afterthought. You didn't really want to take the time to make a accurate, beautiful sunset. You just kind of wanted to throw that down. This light color up here is not going to exist because our sun is over here. So this is going to get progressively darker. And then, just for good measure, the sky transition is generally really smooth and very blended. So I went in with a soft brush, laid down the color, and now I'm going in with a smudge brush to smudge it all in. And if you wanted to add clouds, I'm going to take a darker color. We'll put in our cloud shape, right? The more we look at clouds, the more we study clouds in real life, the more we can put down some realistic clouds or semi-realistic clouds or cartoon clouds and have that choice be intentional. We always want to be intentional in what we're doing. It's great when something starts as, I like it, so I'll do it. But we also want to have a reason for doing what we do. Right, so as we put in our clouds, this color I'm putting in underneath is because our sun is below our clouds, so they're going to catch a little bit of that light on their bottoms. Now we have clouds in our background, we have a sunset that reflects how the natural physical world works, but it still looks cartoony. Now, of course, being a critique, this is a really fast pop in. I would spend probably another 30 minutes really perfecting this. So here we have a lot of brightness up here, which does not go with our sun being over in this direction. We have a lot of brush marks that don't quite read as clouds. I'm all for a painterly effect. I'm all for spending less time on a background, but it feels like you didn't want to spend a lot of time on the background. So we put in that smooth gradient. We have a darker color over here, which helps her shadowy side read more shadowed. I think you know that some shadows need to be blurry and some shadows, right? We have this need to be soft and some shadows need to be harsh. Because this is making a cast shadow and it is bigger, this is actually going to be a softer shadow up here. And this will also be a soft shadow as the form curves around. Curves get soft shadows, plane changes get harsher shadows. I think her elbow would be a little higher unless this is sitting really far forward. So we would have this shadow. We're also going to have some wrinkles as the fabric folds along the elbow line. So we'll put that there. Right, so we can add shadows. We can add more details without necessarily adding more lines or more texture. Last but not least, I feel like, this is personal opinion, I feel like you could actually do a larger canvas. If you expand it more, she's going to better fit in the canvas. And I would actually, you have an option. She's kind of hitting the center, but she is more heavy on this side. So I'd actually move her that way just a little bit. So she's not dead center in the canvas. She's slightly on the side of the frame, but I also have more canvas over here so that I have her full costume and the canvas over here to have her full costume. The cool thing about digital art is if you make something and it fills up the canvas and you need a little bit more space around it, you can just add canvas. Whereas if this were a traditional piece, I would say you want to make her a little bit smaller so that you can better have her fit on the canvas. Composition is one of those weird subjects that it's hard to make rules for. Because with lighting, with shadows, I can say, well, in the natural world, this is how things behave. And even though this is a cartoon style, this is how light would affect this shape. Whereas composition is more aesthetic. Generally, not a hard rule. Generally, if you have a subject, it is more interesting if they are not in the center of the canvas. So you could be using the rule of thirds, where if we divide the canvas into thirds, her face is over in this quadrant, and that would give you, you would have more sky that you would have to paint. And when we are painting a subject, unless we are doing a bust where we are specifically cutting off at certain points, we're going to want the figure to take up the whole canvas, but also have space around them. Since we are doing a full body, we want the full body and the full costume in frame. For this one, we smoothed out the sky to reflect a more natural sunset. We changed where the light part of the sky is, again to reflect a sunset. We added a few details within the figure, such as making the shadow in her sleeve a little bit lighter. I think this one's really cool. I like the sad little sheep. I also feel like, I could be totally wrong on this, it feels like she is helping the sheep, but I'm wondering if there's more of a story that maybe she is not a nice person. Again, I have no idea. This could be from something, this could be original character. I think it's pretty neat either way. And then I wanted to touch on this guy pretty briefly. One thing that I think will help make things feel finished is these little details. So like removing that. This is really minute, but Where the halftone covers the line that's on the nose, I would remove that unless you are taking this halftone onto the nose to continue to be that rim light. I would do it that route rather than letting it cross over the line. Minor notes, his ear would come down to here. And if his mask is coming all the way around like that, it would cover his ear technically. With this, I think you can go remove the lines here, right? This is the clavicle. It's one of the few bones I know the name of. With the clavicle, it is kind of a transition like that, and with this, it's a bit of a harsher transition, but it's not quite that harsh. You can depict this with a much softer transition. And then I do kind of like this little shape that appears on your noses. I would also make sure you can make it a little bit more complex to include like the shape of the nostril if you so wanted. I notice you kind of have a very squared off style with the way the noses are, the way the tips of the fingers are. With the hair, it is sweeping back like that. So as this sweeps back and folds over, this highlight is going to be there. Highlight of our hair goes with the direction of hair growth. So with the original, you were saying that his hair is growing up from the top of his head, flopping over. It helps if I point with my cursor and not my finger. You're saying his hair is growing this way, and then there's some hair that is flopping over this way. If that is the case, then these should have little tips as they go up like that, and this should have a shadow as it comes down like that. But I think the more logical approach is that all of his hair is flipping backwards rather than this flipping forward. I also say that because this is flipping up like so, then it makes more sense that his hair is also flipping back like that. Now he may have the tips of his hair where these strands end, at which case you can go in and kind of define those little bits of hair. Overall, again, I think some of your use of texture is very neat. It kind of adds to the overall style and choices within the pieces. But I also think some of that texture is trying to make up for a lack of visual library. When you are doing a cartoon style, when you are working in something that is very stylized, it is important to still study from life, to still do realism-esque studies, because you are adding to your visual library. You're adding to what is the anatomy of the nose, what is the anatomy of the eye, how does light affect the face in these different situations, how does the facial anatomy change as the expression changes. With those realism studies, not that you have to paint things blow for blow realism, with those realism studies you then have built up your knowledge, and you come back to one of your pieces that uses a more cartoon style, and you can make deliberate choices. I know his hair is moving this direction, so all the highlight in his hair is going to be in a specific place. These highlights are going to behave a certain way. His hair is going to behave a certain way. Style at the end of the day is going to be how you paint and draw. You can't decide every aspect of your style, but you can make the deliberate choice in a piece that I'm going to use this color because of this, which sometimes it's just because I like purple. I do like purple. So here we have, we've changed the highlight in his hair. We made his ear a little bit longer. We cleaned up a couple little places, and we removed some of the lines in there to make a more painterly style. I would say you could also remove this line separating his chin, add a bit more to his hair. Again, this is for the purpose of demonstration. I'm not trying to make a completed piece. I'm not trying to say this is the right and only way to do things. I end up recording this twice because, one, I ramble a lot, and also because sometimes I paint over something and I know the concept, but my execution is kind of poopy. Anywho, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope there are things in here that you can apply to your own artwork. These are probably my favorite video to make because I do enjoy teaching. I do enjoy trying to find out new things about art and relaying that information. And I find critiques is the most applicable form of applying that knowledge, and I find them to be incredibly helpful. If you did find this video helpful, please give it a like, consider subscribing to my channel, leave a comment down below letting me know how you pronounce crayon. Now I have to go find out if Webster Dictionary pronounces them all the same. And I'll see you in the next one.